Hi, welcome to Kustomcraftsandmore. My name's Karen. I've created 6 projects for you with Sonnet's curated Makers Box. I am part of the Sonnet's Garden Blooms networking group, and we were challenged with creating with the papers for her September relaunch. I hope you enjoy the 6 projects that I have created for you today.
Okay, so project one, we use these old encyclopedias along with Roycycled Autumn Masterboard decoupage paper. And here I am trying to decide which part of this paper that I'm going to use. I really liked this deer with the trees, but I had decided that the ducks and the moon were a little more fitting for what I was going to. I took the covers off of the encyclopedias. Here I am showing you how I used a box cutter to cut that binding and then pull off those covers. I got a whole set of the encyclopedias free off Facebook Marketplace. They were pretty beat up. Don't come at me for tearing apart a book. These were probably going to go into the landfill anyway. So I had 3 already done, and here I am deciding how I want to stack them. They were 3 different sizes. So once I decided that, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to put the ducks on there, and I decided that if I were to display this, I would probably put the book pages facing out, um, sort of like I have them here, so that I would have the ducks and get as much of that moon and some of that the grassy area in. So I laid it out where I wanted, and then I used my fingers to make creases along the edges of the part of the paper that I was planning on using. And when I cut it, I do cut just beyond those lines to give myself some extra paper. I want to make sure that I have enough and not too little. It's easier to take away than to try to add. So as you can see, that top page did come off. We do fix that later with double-sided tape. So I'm using liquid patina here. My cover was a little stuck. Make sure you clean those covers before you cover them up. So once I got it open, I applied a good amount to that page. Well, first I dumped some out because you don't want to be dipping back into your containers when using DIY paint because they are made with natural ingredients. So they can start to stink or mold. So I put a nice even coat here, just a little starter strip so that I could get my paper down and make sure it was going to stay where I wanted it. I spritzed the paper a little bit just to help make it a little more maneuverable and lay a little flatter. So as you can see, I do a little strip on the inside and then I'm able to smooth it out with the paintbrush. I did, pick it up and get some wrinkles out as I went along. This paper is thicker than tissue paper, so you do have the ability to have a little more movement than if you were using tissue paper, but you do have to be careful not to overwork the paper so that you don't tear it. So I made sure the edges, especially the corners, were down good, just adding a little more liquid patina to ensure that they were stuck down. We don't want our edges coming up. So once that was dry, I took scissors and I cut along the edge to give us a nice clean edge of our page. As you can see here, like I said, the page had popped off the book. So once we have our clean edges here, we are going to lay it back to where we want it just to make sure we're still good here. And then we're going to use that double-sided tape that I talked about. I get this from Dollar Tree. I also have bought double-sided tape off Amazon, which I will leave a link in the description below. They are not all created equally for sure. You do need to make sure this is well down on the paper so that you can get those edges off. And then once it is, you gently place it and then push it down so that it will adhere. And then I was trying to decide what color twine. I didn't like that orange or the light one. I felt like the darker one went best with this paper. So I wrapped it around just 3 or 4 times, then kind of pulled the edges to ensure that it was tight around our books, holding them together but not too tight at the same time, and tied a knot. Then I took some of this burlap ribbon that was in my stash also from Dollar Tree, and I cut about a 7 or 8 inch piece and tied a knot. To finish this off, I had some greenery that had some green and kind of autumny colors in it and tied that together. Stay tuned to the end to see how we style these. So project 2, we're using the Painted Photographer's pumpkin rice paper here. This was a fairly simple project. I got this frame at a garage sale. I think I had a couple of them. It looked like one of them had an IKEA sticker on it, but it is just a raw wood frame. And here I am kind of making sure that it's going to fit in the frame without the white edges or anything. So I set all of that aside and I painted the frame in DIY's Farm Fresh. Yes, I did dip my paint into the container here. You'll see I do that the rest of the video. So I gave this 2 good coats, letting it dry thoroughly between coats, front and back, making sure I was getting all those edges and everything in there. You could have probably done 1 coat, but I wanted to make sure I had pretty full coverage on this. And I went with the Farm Fresh because the Painted Photographer, one of the colors that she used in the paper, she paints these pictures herself. So in the paper you see there's also some specs. So I used weathered wood. This container was from Sonnet's curated Makers Box, maybe last month or a month ago. I used my paintbrush and just kind of flicked the brushes after I flicked it at first just to get some spots. You'll see down there got kind of a drip, but you'll see we get out a little Farm Fresh and we touch that up and it looks just fine. So just giving some kind of paint spots kind of pulled in the background of the picture of the pumpkins into the frame. So then we took that watered down weathered wood and I kind of did like a stain treatment on this little tag. These were one of the gifts in Sonnet's curated Makers Box, one of these past months. Sorry, I don't remember which month. So we took the plastic off the frame and laid that in there and then we put together our pumpkin. At this point I realized we just needed to trim off just a hair at the top to make it lay flatter. You could decoupage this to the back, but I wanted whoever purchased this to be able to change it out for different holidays. This Farm Fresh can be good for spring or even Christmas. So then I pulled out some ribbon from my stash. These have been in my stash forever. They've come from all over the place, probably Dollar Tree, Michael's, clearance at Hobby Lobby, Joann's, who knows. So I just pulled out some colors that I felt like went well. There was an orange, a burlap, a cream, this kind of sagey lace that was just a little lighter than the Farm Fresh. And then this brown that I've had forever. So then I cut these just different lengths and I kind of laid them out to make a messy bow. There's no rhyme or reason to this. It was just kind of whatever I thought looked good as I was setting those out. So I did about 2 layers of each, you'll see. And then I took some of that black, or brown, I'm sorry, and I tied a knot there. So figured out where I wanted it and then went ahead and trimmed those edges to the size I wanted. I trimmed them on just a little angle. Sorry that that's a little out of frame there. When you are cutting ribbon, you want to make sure you have a good sharp pair of scissors so that you don't fray your edges. So I cut the little ends off and then I took some more of that burlap and I made a little bow to go on top of the messy bow. So I decided I wanted it in the corner with the tag just peeking out a little bit. So I got out my hot glue gun, positioned everything to make sure that I had enough of the tag sticking out. This Ryobi glue gun gets very, very hot. Burnt my fingers numerous times, but it is amazing wireless glue gun with rechargeable batteries. So I went ahead and I got everything glued on and decided the tag needed a stamp. So I have these stamps that I got from Michael's. They have all the letters, some duplicates, and you're able to click them together to make words. So I spelled out fall and stamped the tag, and then I pulled my stamps back out because I decided it needed something a little more than fall. So I decided it also needed to say happy, so happy fall. So you can see I'm pulling them apart to click together and then stamping that. Okay, project 3 was very simple one. I found this oval shape in this beautiful brown stain at a garage sale or rummage sale. So I'm taking DIY's crinoline. Once again, that little jar is from Sonnet's Curated Makers Box, and I loved this owl, and I thought the frame that was on this owl went perfectly onto this oval. So I knew with the dark wood I was going to have to paint a lighter color under it, but I wanted to leave the edge, that dark wood. So I went ahead and just kind of cleaned up the edge a little bit. They were dusty. It's just a baby wipe. Got a lot of the dust and things off before I painted. A little bit of the baby wipe got on it, so I just used a paintbrush to get it off. There were some rough pieces of wood on the edge. So I gave this 2 good coats of crinoline to make sure that that dark wood was fully covered and I'd have a good base to make my owl pop off of. So you can see the first coat, it goes on pretty light and you can still see some of that wood popping through. Might have been okay with just 1 coat, but I really wanted to make sure that that owl and the frame around him was the star of this plaque. So once we got that coat on, I did another coat off camera. And then it was back and dry. So I cut out the owl. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of using the liquid patina to put it on, but I did just, as I did in the first step, and did a starter strip and then put it down and continued to cover it with liquid patina. So here you see me using this little sander, which I will also link in the description, to just get the edges off and make sure we have nice clean edges here around our plaque. Sorry, this looks like I was a little bit out of frame here too, but you can kind of see right at the bottom what I'm doing and how that paper is coming off and giving us that clean edge. I promise I do come back into frame here. So I just took an X-Acto knife. There was one little piece that was stuck. And then I wiped up any crinoline. DIY paint is reactivated with water, so it's very easy to wipe up with a baby wipe or a damp rag. And so now I took some DIY's dark wax, and I wanted to just kind of bring out that wood a little more while blending the edge of that paper into that dark wood. So project 4, I found this frame at Hobby Lobby. I shop the Hobby Lobby 90% off home decor constantly, so I believe this frame, it had like a $3 price tag on it. So we're going to use the Roycycled decoupage paper. I believe this is the Autumn Plaid, if I remember right. And then those 3 ovals I had found in my stash were already painted with Summer Crush. So we're getting the price sticker off of this, and I will take the price stickers and things off the back later on. Most of these items will be for fit sale in my booth. So I took DIY's vintage linen or white swan, one of their whites, and I painted over this pig so that we had a good white base for our decoupage paper to go on. This did take about 3 coats to cover up that black. So here we are back. We've got a good coat of white, but just a little bit on the edge. You can see some of that black shining through. So I just took my brush and just did a few strokes to cover up that one side. Probably would have been fine with the plaid paper, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't have any of that pig or that checker coming through. So then we took Fusion's Woodwick, and we're going to go ahead and paint this frame with the Woodwick. It did take 2 coats with Fusion paint. The first coat you want to go on very lightly, just kind of a coat to get it on there. You're going to see a lot of streaks. It's one of those paints you got to trust the process. Fusion does have a top coat built in, so this is a one-step paint. So very gently I went into the edges. I wasn't too worried about getting a little bit since it would be under the paper, but I tried as best I could to keep those edges clean. And then we just did the top of the frame and of course all four sides. And like I said, this did take 2 coats, but there was no top coat needed. I did find that long strokes were the best. If I used some short strokes on the sides, it was giving me some lines and brush strokes that I didn't want. Fusion for me seems to be self-leveling as well, especially when you do the first thin coat. The brush coats or the brush strokes are very few, if any. So once I had the second coat on and it was dry, we took the Autumn Plaid from recycled decoupage paper, and once again I used my fingers to kind of show me where I needed to cut, and I did cut just a little wider or longer. I did use the corner of the paper, so I knew I had 2 straight sides to start in the frame. So we're getting out DIY's liquid patina again, and we're gonna put a good coat in there along the white. Now you want to be careful and make sure you don't get any on the frame, because your decoupage paper will then get stuck to the frame, and you'll see later we did have a little bit of that and I had to go in and touch it up. So we did that starter strip again and used that straight line from the edge of the paper to make sure that we were lined up. And then since this was such a small surface, I just went ahead and went through and did the rest of it. And then I used my fingers to push this down, make sure the corners were down and everything before putting a top coat of liquid patina on there. So we're getting that top coat on, making sure it's good and no wrinkles, things like that, and then it's all covered. Then we went ahead and let that dry. I did go ahead and wipe along the edges just a little bit if I saw any liquid patina, trying to make sure that my sides weren't going to stick. Unfortunately, like I said, they do. I did do a little touch up at the end there. So once that was dry, I went ahead and took my X-Acto knife to get those edges cleaned up. We only had the 2 because we did use the straight sides of the corner of the paper on the other 2. So you see I'm having a little trouble because it is stuck to the side of the frame there. So I was able to pull that out. Especially with the corner, I was a little heavy on the corner, so when you are doing this, just take your time. Don't let it pull in the corner, but touch-ups are okay. Everything handmade is perfectly imperfect, so you can see that side was really stuck there. So what I did was I ended up using my fingernail to kind of push it down a little bit. So here you see I'm getting my wood wick back out and just going in there and giving that a little touch up to make sure that the white of that frame was not showing. Okay, once we did that, and now it was on to decorating our frame. So I have this stick, I have a bunch of them that are cut in my craft room that I use for pumpkin stems. So I fit that into the top where I knew I wanted that to be and made sure the 2 ovals were where I wanted them. I put them just a tad bit off of the frame and then glued that 3rd one on top. And like I said, these were painted with Summer Crush previously. They were in my stash. So this is some wired kind of twine that I got at Dollar Tree. So I did cut probably about 7 or 8 inches of this, wrapped it around my paintbrush to make some, is it trendles? I'm not sure, but just little squigglies for the pumpkin. So the edges did come unraveled, so I ended up just putting a little bit of hot glue and kind of twisting them back so that they covered up that wire. And then I also kind of bent the wire down just a little bit on those edges to help them stay. So once I had that all secure, I figured out where exactly I wanted it, and so underneath that top oval, just put a little hot glue. Then I had this green leaf, but it was kind of too big just to stick on there, so I cut it into smaller leaves. You'll see once it's glued on, it kind of looks like one big leaf, but it did give some layered effect to it. Up close you can tell that it is just smaller leaves kind of glued together there. So I got those all placed onto our pumpkin. And then I have these beads in my stash, little berries, not sure where they came from. Had two different, the dark red and kind of that orangey. So I twisted one of each color together and figured out kind of where I wanted to position those and hot glued those in place as well. What you won't see, but you will see in the finished product at the end of this video, is I did use some Spanish moss at the bottom. Once I looked at it again, it looked like it needed something kind of for the pumpkin to be sitting on. So in the finished product at the end, you will see Spanish moss on there. So for project 5, we're using the Fruitful Harvest stamp set from Iron Orchid Designs, or IOD, and we're creating this embossed look on our pumpkins. So we're also using Roycycle Decoupage paper, Autumn Flannel, the pumpkin stamp from the Harvest stamp set. And I had these wood shapes, just showing you that you could use the leaf out of the stamp set to also possibly make the embossed. The leaf just about fits. These cutouts came from Dollar Tree. They typically have them every year. And the acorn is also another option if you wanted to use the stamps. So here the plan is to use these on this frame, possibly with the leaves. So we need to make a couple more and show you how to do this embossed look. So the first thing we want to do is paint our pumpkins. We have our Fusion Woodwick back out to paint the stem. There is a hole in the stem, but I wasn't too worried about this because I knew I was probably going to put a bow or something on it. Then we use DIY's Summer Crush again to paint the base of our pumpkin. We kept the same color palette throughout the entire video. And I'll have links in the description as to where you can buy the DIY paint. I do sell Fusion paint, but only in my booth, not online, so I will link to where you can buy it online as well. So here I'm showing that we're going to use Versamark, which is like a clear watermark, but kind of a glue. So we're going to press this down. I bought this little thing at a craft show. It was handmade. It just helps to keep the pressure even on the stamp, and that clear block is probably from Stampin' Up! Or another craft store. So we used embossing powder in black. We want to make sure that we get it all over that Versamark. So as you can see, it's basically stuck, kind of like the Versamark is a glue to all the lines and everything on the stamp. You want to make sure you put this powder away before you start embossing with your heat gun, because the heat gun will blow air and you'll have that powder all over the place. Ask me how I know. So you want your heat gun or your embossing gun to heat up, and you're going to see as you go that the powder starts turning a glossy black. It's hard to see on camera. You can see the little pigments of the powder when they haven't melted and aren't glossy yet. If you touch it, those pigments will just kind of separate and stuff. So then we're going to do what stampers or card makers call fussy cutting. We're going to get as close to the edge as possible, just leaving it a little bit so that we have the edge of that stamp. So you want to go as close as possible. Sometimes it's easier to move the paper, as you'll see me do, versus turning the scissors. You turn the paper. So we've got that all cut out. So now we've gotten our painted ones, which these will be a bonus project that you can find on my Instagram and my Facebook. But I wanted to show you that you could also emboss on this wood and how easy it was. So the stamp just about fits. You'll see it's just a little off on the sides, but that's okay. It's a pumpkin. That first one, you can see I kind of missed a whole corner of it. We'll go back at the end and I'll show you how to fix it. The stem just about lines up. It's a little off, but for what we're using it for, it's a pretty good fit. You're not going to find something that exactly fits. So we went ahead and we got all of them marked with the Versamark and the stamp. Now I put the wood on top and pressed down versus putting the stamp on top of the wood. This was just because I was able to control the edges a little bit better, making sure they got where I wanted as close to the edge as possible. You could probably do this the other way around, stamping onto the wood instead of pressing the wood into the stamp, since it is a clear stamp. So once we've got all of those done and our powder safely back in the jar so that we're not blowing it around the room, but you can see I've spilled some, we're going to get that heat gun out again and we are going to heat all of these pumpkins. Once again, we're looking for that powder to melt and turn into a glossy embossed black image. I'm sorry that it's so hard to see on the camera, but you might be able to see it just a little bit as it changes pigment. In person, you can see that pigment kind of melting and turning into that glossy black kind of raised look. I'm excited to try this with some other IOD stamps, especially some Christmas stamps. Embossing powder typically comes in different colors, including glitter, so you should be able to do some really nice things for the upcoming holidays. So this does take a little while, especially making sure all of those little lines have melted. So now we're going to go back and we're going to fix that corner. So you see I put the Versamark on the corner, realize it's the wrong side. So we do it again. So what I do is I place it and line it up, but I only put pressure on that one area that I missed. And get our powder back out. We get a wipe to get that Versamark off of our stamp. So just a wet wipe or a baby wipe to make sure we're not leaving that on our stamp. And then we just went through and gave that little edge of the pumpkin some heat to get that, and then I went back over all of them one more time. So like I said, the rest of these pumpkins will be a bonus project that you can find on my Facebook or Instagram page, Kustomcraftsandmore. I will link that in the description. So now we're just kind of decorating, putting this all together, our pumpkins with the autumn flannel recycled decoupage paper that we've embossed on, and our wooden pumpkin. So all of these little things are from my stash. Some have come from garage sales, some I like to shop when Hobby Lobby goes 90% off or Michael's goes 80% off at the end of the season, and just make sure that I always have a stash of all these things. So I think the larger wooden leaves came from Joann's on a pick, and I've just cut that apart. The little wheat stalks, I believe, came from a garage sale. I just had the two of them, but I thought they were perfect for this project. And then, like I said, I wasn't too worried about the little hole in the pumpkin. I took some green raffia and tied it together, and then I did a twine bow. So now we're getting ready to glue everything down with the Ryobi glue gun, which like I said, I'll link in the description. This gun does get hot. I mean, you can see the glue smoking sometimes. It's so hot. But it is great cordless with rechargeable batteries. So as long as you remember to charge your battery, you're not running out. I did use hot glue to glue down the decoupage paper in this one. It gave a little more texture actually to the pumpkins rather than them laying flat. And I was putting so much on top of them that I figured it would be okay with the glue gun, but you could also use the liquid patina or any liquid glue to adhere them down. So those little wooden acorns were on picks, and I just cut the picks off. So project 6 is with the Painted Photographer's Autumn Light. So when I saw this paper, it kind of gave me more of a Christmas feeling, and part of me told me maybe do a Christmas project, but I was like, no, I really want to try the busted canvas with some fall papers and things like that. So this project went okay at the beginning. I didn't have a canvas board for the back of the canvas I had in my stash, but I did have this chip board that was the 12 by 12 size of the canvas. This chipboard soaked up the liquid patina, so you can see I'm putting on a very thick coat going back over those corners. So that was the first thing, was getting the lantern rice paper adhered to this chipboard to ensure that we had the backing for our busted canvas. So once that was done, we set it aside. So I liked the brown that this canvas came in, but I wanted a little more texture on the front. So I took a piece of tissue paper and crumpled it up, and then I'm going to use liquid patina to adhere it to the front of the canvas. This is just going to give us another little bit of texture for this busted canvas. So we use liquid patina to push it down. We want all those wrinkles in there. Later on, we're going to dry brush those and bring some of those out some more. So we made sure we get all the edges and pushed it down. I'm not worrying about the back of the canvas because that chipboard is going to cover up the entire back of the canvas. So we just want to get this adhered to the sides. Make sure that it's all stuck down, and then we're going to set this aside and let it dry. So now that our tissue paper is dry on there, we need to create the busted part of our canvas, or the rolls that you're going to see. So I had this pumpkin paper, which I thought fit with the autumn theme of the lantern and the rest of the projects today. So I just used my fingers to make some indents to size the paper, and then use my paper cutter to cut it out. And this is going to go face up, but on the back of the canvas. This is so that when we cut the canvas and we roll it out, we're going to see those pumpkins on top of that textured tissue paper that we created. So I put a good even coat of liquid patina. Since this was a small surface and on the canvas, I went ahead and just did the whole thing, no starter strip. And then I pushed my paper down. This is scrapbooking paper. It's thick cardstock, so it didn't take much to get the wrinkles out or anything. It's not thin like tissue paper. So we went ahead and got a good coat on the top. And then we're gonna, I used a paper bag because there were a couple bubbles in the middle that I wanted to get out. So this just makes it smoother to go over, and my hand didn't get full of liquid patina. Okay, so we let that dry as well. But while that was drying, we took a little hand sander, and since the tissue paper was dry, we wanted to get it off of the canvas, all the extra. So we just used a sander in a downward motion. Kind of looks upward, I guess, on here. Just to rip that tissue paper. Like I said, we're not too worried about the underneath of the canvas, so even if there was some left, it could easily be just folded over and glued under that chipboard that contains our rice paper. So I run all around the edges. As you can see, there's a little piece hanging off. I'm not too worried about that. I can just pull that off or just fold it over and glue it under the chipboard. So we're almost done here. Got all the sides. And then I went over just to make sure those edges were down. So it's just whatever liquid patina was left on the brush. Okay, so now that canvas is dry on both sides, we're going to take DIY's Farm Fresh and we're going to paint over that tissue paper. We're just going to give it one good coat. I'm not too worried about getting in all the nicks and crannies, but I did use a pretty big chip brush just to make sure that I was getting pretty good coverage and fairly quickly across the entire surface. So you want to give this one good even coat. Farm Fresh covered very well over the tissue paper and the brown that the canvas already was. This canvas had come that color and was just in my stash. It's been sitting there for years, so it was time for it to be used. So once we got that done, we of course let that dry. Here I'm just making sure I had a good even coat. Some of the edges had started to look dry, so it looked a little white. So now we have DIY's Weathered Wood. So this is one of the colors that the painted photographer Connie used. Now you see I started a dry brush and I put some paint on and then I offloaded it onto my drop cloth, but then my brush was a little wet, so I went ahead and dried it. You can see now the difference. So I offloaded it and then just went over and I'm just dry brushing all of the edges. And that's bringing out the texture of that tissue paper. And this just gives a little another layer of texture and color. So this is where things start going wrong. So my box cutter was not sharp enough. So we made that cut and then we went to the X-Acto knife, which was sharper but not quite. So I made the cuts so that we had 4 parts of the busted canvas, which should have been enough, but this is where I really started going wrong. I decided that wasn't enough and we needed to have 8. And so I went through and I cut, and I'm going to admit some of these cuts were not even. Some of them looked a little questionable, but at this point we had to go with it because we had started cutting. So I laid the lantern paper under there, but I hadn't glued it on just to see kind of where we were. At this point I realized I made too many cuts and probably cut too far because I could see the cardboard. So I went and found this gourd paper in my stash, and I'm going to cut it just so that it's going to cover the edge of the paper. We're going to make sure we're not seeing any of that chipboard if somebody were to look inside of the busted canvas. So I just cut it so that I had one for both sides. The top and the bottom were going to be glued onto the canvas, so you weren't going to see any of that chipboard. So I went ahead and did that, and I took my double-sided tape from Dollar Tree again and adhered it so that the edges would stay down. Pulled off the backing on that double-sided tape and then laid down our gourd paper. Made sure that it was even with the edge of the white border on the lantern, and then I did the same thing on the other side. Sometimes it's hard to get that double-sided tape to start pulling off the paper. So then I went ahead and I trimmed the edges. I had cut it a little bigger, making sure that I was covering all the chipboard because I didn't want to have to go back and do this again. I was already kind of not thrilled where with this project was going. Why I decided to do a busted canvas for a video the first time I did it, I don't know, but we're going with it. Alright, so we took the glue gun. We rolled, we pressed, we held, and we kept going. And once again, we run into problems. The glue's not sticking. Now, this Ryobi glue gun gets hot, so sometimes the glue takes a little longer to set and stick. So I'm holding it, I'm using a paintbrush, but it's not sticking. It's literally popping up dry. At this point, I realized the coat of Big Top I probably put over the DIY paint is maybe just not adhering to the hot glue. So instead of making you continue to watch this, I did the rest off camera, used some double-sided tape to help it stay, and we ended up with this. So here are our finished products. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Sorry for the bad lighting. It was dark when I took these pictures, so there is shadows. But we completed 6 projects in this video using Sonnet's curated Makers Box and the decoupage paper from Recycled Decoupage and rice paper from the Painted Photographer.
So thank you for joining me today while I created these 6 projects using the Sonnet's curated Makers Box, as well as the decoupage paper by Recycled and the rice paper by the Painted Photographer. Like I said, this playlist, this video is part of a challenge from Sonnet's Garden Blooms networking group. Her membership is currently open, and we'd love to have you join us. It's a great group of ladies, all very supportive, working our small businesses, learning how to grow them. So you can find info at sonnetsgardenblooms.com on her membership group or by emailing her. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed these projects. I look forward to creating more YouTube videos and projects. Holiday crafting, I'm prepping for shows. I have 9 shows this season, so I'll definitely be